My name is Annabelle Thompson, and I am 28 years old. 4 weeks ago, my parents sold my grandmother's antique piano, the one she had promised would be mine since I was old enough to reach the pedals, and used the money to buy my younger sister a brand new Mercedes, not a used sedan, not a practical little car with decent gas mileage and a cup holder that did not require an engineering degree. A Mercedes. Silver. Shiny. Ridiculous enough to make every neighbor slow down in front of the house and pretend they were checking their mailbox. They sold the piano for $95,000. And before you ask, yes, I said, $95,000. That was the exact amount my father bragged about later. Like he had just made the smartest business deal in the state of Pennsylvania, instead of selling a dying woman's most treasured possession behind her back. The piano was a Steinway from 1892. My grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore, had played it for most of her life. It had traveled with her through concert halls, church benefits, holiday gatherings, and more family arguments than any piece of furniture should ever have to witness. That piano had a history. It had dignity. It had more class than half the people in my family. Which, to be fair, was not a terribly high bar. Grandma had promised it to me because I was the only one who still played. I teach piano for a living. Mostly children. Some are talented. Some are enthusiastic. Some hit the keys like they are trying to make the poor instrument confess to a crime. But I love it. I love watching a kid go from banging out noise to finding a melody. I love the moment their face changes, because they realize their hands can create something beautiful. My parents did not see it that way. To my father, teaching music was not a career. It was a hobby with invoices. He ran a small investment consulting firm outside Philadelphia, and he believed any job that did not involve handshakes, golf lunches, and pretending to understand the stock market was basically charity work. My mother agreed with him. Of course, Diane Thompson had a talent for turning disapproval into a full-time occupation. She could look at my apartment, my clothes, my car, or my paycheck, and make me feel like I had personally offended the American dream. Then there was Megan. Megan was my younger sister by 4 years. And from the day she was born, my parents acted like she had arrived carrying a certificate from heaven that said, "This one matters more." She was pretty, social, charming when she wanted something, and very good at making people believe she was helpless, right before asking them to do things for her. My parents called her sensitive. I called it professionally dependent, but only in my head, because I still had some survival instincts. Megan had always gotten the better bedroom, the better birthday parties, the better attention. When she failed a class in college, my parents blamed the professor. When I got straight A's, they asked why I had not joined more clubs. When she quit a job because her manager had bad energy, my mother said she was protecting her mental health. When I worked weekends teaching lessons to pay my own rent, my father said I needed to think bigger. Funny how thinking bigger usually meant thinking more like him. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of town. It was not fancy, but it was clean, safe, and mine. My kitchen was small. My couch was secondhand. And my upstairs neighbor owned a dog that apparently practiced tap dancing at midnight. Still, I paid my bills. I bought my own groceries. I did not owe anyone anything. My parents treated that like a personal failure. At family dinners, my father would ask if I was still doing the music thing. My mother would remind me that I could have married someone stable by now. As if husbands were sold next to laundry detergent at Costco. Megan would usually glance up from her phone long enough to smile and say, "Anna just likes a simple life." Simple. That was their favorite word for me. Simple apartment. Simple job. Simple clothes. Simple goals. They said it like it was pity. Like I had missed some grand elevator to success and chosen the stairs because I was too stubborn to push the button. But Grandma never spoke to me that way. Grandma Eleanor understood music because music had been the shape of her whole life. She had performed when she was young, taught when she was older, and kept playing long after arthritis made her fingers stiff. She was not soft in the way people imagine. Grandmothers are supposed to be soft. She did not bake cookies every Thursday or pretend bad behavior was adorable because family was family. Grandma loved hard, but she saw clearly. When I was 7, she sat me on the bench beside her and showed me where middle C was. I remember being nervous, my feet swinging above the floor, my hands too small to stretch across the keys. I hit the wrong note 3 times in a row and started to cry, because even then I hated feeling stupid. Grandma did not fuss. She did not say, "Poor baby." She simply tapped the bench and said, "Again." So I tried again. That was how she taught. Not with pressure, but with faith. She believed I could do hard things before I believed it myself. When my parents dismissed me, Grandma listened. When they forgot my recitals, she showed up in the front row. When my father said teaching children was not a real profession, Grandma said, "A child who learns discipline, beauty, and patience from music has been given something money cannot buy." My father had laughed at that. Of course he did. If a value could not be deposited, deducted, invested, or used to impress another man in a navy blazer, Richard Thompson had no idea what to do with it. The last time Grandma told everyone the piano would be mine, we were gathered in her living room. It was about a month before everything fell apart. She had been weaker that day, sitting in her favorite chair with a blanket over her knees. But her eyes were sharp enough to cut glass. "The Steinway goes to Annabelle," she said. The room went quiet. My father's jaw tightened. My mother looked at Megan. Megan rolled her eyes and muttered something about sentimental junk. I sat very still. Because when you spend your life being the person nobody chooses, being chosen out loud feels dangerous. Like if you move too quickly, someone will take it back. Grandma looked straight at me. "You are the only one who understands what it means," she said. I wanted to cry, but I did not. In my family, tears were evidence. If you cried, someone used it against you later. So I just nodded and said, "I promise I'll take care of it." Grandma smiled then, small and tired. "But, certain, there are some things more valuable than money," she said. "And some people only learn that after they try to sell them." At the time, I thought she was speaking in general. I should have known better, because my grandmother never wasted words. Not even when she was dying. The way she said it stayed with me all the way home that night, sitting beside me in the passenger seat like a warning I did not want to look at. At the time, I still believed my family had limits. That sounds almost cute now, doesn't it? Like believing the raccoon in your trash can is just browsing and not planning a full kitchen invasion. I knew my parents could be selfish. I knew Megan could turn neediness into an Olympic event. But I still thought there were certain lines people did not cross. Especially when it came to Grandma Eleanor. She was not just old furniture and family stories. She was the center of the only warm memories I had growing up. My parents' house always felt like a place where you had to earn your right to take up space. The thermostat was set too low. The furniture was too expensive to sit on comfortably. And every dinner felt like a performance review. But Grandma's house was different. Her living room had books stacked beside chairs, sheet music on the coffee table, and that old Steinway sitting near the front window. Polished, but never treated like a museum piece. She believed beautiful things should be used. "An instrument is not a coffin," she used to say. "It is supposed to make noise." And that piano made every kind of noise you can imagine. It carried Chopin, hymns, Christmas carols, beginner scales, birthday songs, and once, when I was about 9, a truly terrible version of Take Me Out to the Ball Game, because I was convinced I could make classical music less boring. Grandma listened with a straight face, which was more than that performance deserved. That was the thing about her. She took me seriously without making me feel small. When I was a kid, I was not like Megan. Megan could walk into a room and somehow make every adult bend toward her. She had dimples, shiny hair, and the kind of confidence that comes from never wondering if people are going to clap. I was quieter. I noticed too much. I remembered who forgot my birthday card. I remembered which relatives asked Megan 3 questions before remembering I was standing there too. Grandma remembered everything. She remembered that I hated coconut cake. She remembered that I liked my hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. She remembered that I got nervous before school concerts. even when I pretended I did not. She would drive to my recitals in her old Buick. I parked too far away because she refused to fight people over a parking space, and walk in wearing lipstick and pearls like she was attending Carnegie Hall instead of a school auditorium that smelled like floor wax and gym socks. My parents missed plenty of those recitals. Work emergency. Dinner with a client. Megan had a soccer game. Megan had a fever. Megan had a bad day. Megan had, apparently, the fragile constitution of a Victorian houseplant. Grandma never missed. She would sit in the front row, her program folded neatly in her lap, and watch me like I was the only person on stage. Even when I played wrong notes, even when my hands shook, even when the kid behind me dropped a violin bow and nearly caused a small public school disaster, afterward, she never said, "You were perfect." She said, "You kept going." That mattered more. By the time I was a teenager, the Steinway had become our place. Not officially. Of course. There was no plaque. Nah, secret password. Just a bench by the window where Grandma and I sat shoulder to shoulder while the rest of the family made noise in other rooms. On Thanksgiving, when my father and uncles argued about football and taxes, Grandma would nod toward the living room and say, "Annabelle, come, help me check the tuning." That was code for, "Let's get away from these people before someone starts explaining the economy again." We would sit at the piano, and she would let me play while the kitchen smelled like turkey, butter, and whatever casserole my mother pretended was an old family recipe, even though I once saw the can of cream of mushroom soup in the trash. Grandma would correct my posture, slap my wrist lightly if I got lazy, and tell me stories about performing when she was young. She had played in concert halls across the Northeast, Philadelphia, Boston, New York, not as a superstar, not the kind of name people put on billboards, but enough that real musicians knew her, enough that she had lived a life built on discipline, travel, applause, disappointment, and beginning again. She told me once that music taught her not to beg for approval. "You practice," she said. "You prepare. You show up. Some people clap. Some people leave early. Either way, you still know what you played." I did not understand how important that was until much later. When I chose to teach music, instead of chasing some corporate job my father could brag about at Rotary lunches, Grandma was the only one who did not act like I had announced plans to live under a bridge. My father said, "There is no money in that." Grandma said, "There is a living in it if she is good and steady." My mother said, "But what will people think?" Grandma said, "Most people are too busy thinking about themselves. Diane. It is one of their less attractive habits." I nearly choked on my iced tea. That was Grandma. Polite voice. Sharp blade. She never shouted. She did not need to. She had the kind of authority that made people straighten up without knowing why. Even my father, who treated every conversation like a board meeting he intended to win, got careful around her. Not respectful exactly. Careful. There is a difference. As Grandma got older, the house changed in small ways. A handrail appeared by the back steps. Her garden got simpler. She stopped hosting big Sunday dinners because standing too long tired her out. But the piano stayed exactly where it had always been, near the window where afternoon light touched the wood. Sometimes I would stop by after teaching and find her sitting beside it, one hand resting on the lid. She played less because her fingers hurt, but she still listened. I would play for her, and she would close her eyes. Not asleep, just somewhere private. One evening, about 2 months before hospice, she asked me to play the nocturne she had performed at her final concert. I did. Not perfectly. Never perfectly. But honestly, when I finished, she opened her eyes and smiled. "That piano knows you," she said. I laughed because I did not know what else to do. "Grandma, it is wood and strings. So are most people. If you catch them on a bad day." That was the kind of thing she could say, and somehow make it sound reasonable. Then her expression changed. She looked toward the hallway, making sure no one else was close enough to hear. My parents had brought dinner that night, which meant my mother had brought salad in a plastic container and acted like she had personally fed the whole county. "Annabelle." Grandma said quietly. When I am gone, I want you to have the Steinway. I went still. She had hinted before. But this was different. Direct. Final. Grandma? You do not have to decide that now. I decided long ago. My throat tightened. Dad will not like it. He does not have to like it. He has to accept it. That sentence should have comforted me. Instead, it made my stomach turn. Because I knew my father. Acceptance was not exactly his strongest muscle. He could accept praise, money, and a good parking spot. Anything else required negotiation? Grandma reached over and took my hand. You are not getting that piano because you are owed a prize, she said. You are getting it because you understand care. You understand memory. You understand that some things are not valuable because of what they can buy, but because of what they keep alive. I looked at the piano, at the worn edge near middle C, where generations of fingers had passed. At the bench cushion, Grandma had recovered herself. At the small scratch on the side from when I dropped a music stand as a child and cried harder than the damage deserved. It was not just an instrument. It was proof that someone in my family had seen me clearly. That was why losing it would hurt. And that was why. When my grandmother was admitted to hospice not long after, I should have known the people around her would start circling the things she loved. I just did not know they would move that fast. I should have seen the first warning sign when my father called on a Tuesday afternoon and did not even pretend to sound sad. I had just finished my last piano lesson of the day. My student, a little boy named Tyler, had spent 30 minutes arguing with the concept of rhythm, like rhythm had personally insulted him. By the end, he could play the first line of Ode to Joy without stopping, which in my profession counts as a small miracle, and possibly grounds for cake. I was wiping pencil marks off sheet music when my phone buzzed. Dad. That alone was unusual. My father did not call me unless he needed something. I wanted to criticize something, or had accidentally hit my name while trying to call Megan. I answered anyway. Because Hope is stubborn and, apparently, not very bright. Annabelle, he said. No, hello. No. How are you? No gentle lead-in. Just my full name. Delivered like a bill had come due. Dad? Your grandmother had another heart attack. The room went quiet around me. Even the old wall clock seemed too loud. What? I sat down on the piano bench. Is she okay? She is stable for now, he said, in the same tone he used when discussing weather delays at the airport. But the doctors are moving her into hospice care. They say we need to be realistic. Realistic. That was my father's favorite word when he wanted everyone else to stop having feelings. Where is she? St. Agnes Hospice Center. We are having a family meeting there in an hour. Be on time. Then he hung up. I stared at the screen for a second, waiting for the rest of the conversation to appear by magic. Maybe a follow-up text. Maybe one sentence that sounded like concern. Nothing came. I packed my music bag with hands that did not feel steady. I told the receptionist I had a family emergency, canceled my last makeup lesson, and drove across town with my chest so tight I had to remind myself to breathe at red lights. Hospice. That word does something to you. It does not slam the door. Exactly. It just makes you hear the lock turning. St. Agnes sat on a quiet street lined with bare winter trees. It was a clean brick building with flower beds out front, a little American flag near the entrance, and a lobby that tried very hard to feel peaceful. Soft chairs, soft lights, soft voices. The kind of place where everyone smiles gently because they know loud happiness would be rude. My parents were already there when I arrived. Of course they were. My father stood near the nurse's station, arms crossed, wearing his charcoal overcoat and the expression of a man waiting for bad service at a restaurant. My mother sat beside him in a camel-colored coat, clutching her designer purse with both hands, like someone might try to steal it and start a new life. Megan leaned against the wall, scrolling on her phone, her blonde hair falling over one shoulder in soft waves that probably took more time than she would ever admit. No one hugged me. My mother looked me up and down first. Because even in hospice, Diane Thompson believed wardrobe judgment was a public service. You came straight from work? She asked. I did. She gave a small sigh. Well, I suppose that makes sense. I looked down at my black cardigan and teaching flats. Nothing was stained. Nothing was torn. But apparently I had failed to dress for the elegant occasion of my grandmother dying. My father cleared his throat. Good. You are here. We need to divide responsibilities. That was it. Not. This is hard. Not. Your grandmother is scared. Not. Are you okay? We need to divide responsibilities. My family could turn grief into a staff meeting faster than most people can find a parking spot. The doctor says mother may have weeks, he continued. Maybe a month or two. If things remain stable, she will need regular visits. Someone to bring personal items. Handle small requests. Keep an eye on the staff. I can do that, I said immediately. He nodded, as if I had accepted a shift at a grocery store. Good. Diane and I have the business to manage. There is a lot happening right now. My mother nodded like she had personally been asked to run the federal government. And Megan, he added, glancing toward my sister, is in a critical phase with Daniel's family. Megan finally looked up. Daniel Harrison was her boyfriend. They had been dating for 8 months. Though the way my parents talked about it, you would think they were negotiating peace between nations. Daniel's father, James Harrison, was my father's most important business partner. And my parents had decided Megan's romance was not merely a relationship. It was a strategic alliance with hair extensions. I have commitments, Megan said softly. Her voice had that polished little tremble she used when she wanted sympathy, without having to do anything useful. I looked at her. Grandma is dying? Megan's eyes widened, offended that I had used the actual situation against her. I know that, Anna. But Daniel's parents are hosting dinner Thursday. And his mother is very particular. You know how these things are. No. Actually, I did not know how these things were. I had never considered impressing a boyfriend's mother more urgent than sitting beside the woman who taught me my first scale. But saying that would only start a fight. And I had spent most of my life avoiding fights in rooms where my parents already knew who they planned to defend. My father turned back to me. Your schedule is the most flexible. There it was. The sentence that sounded practical until you heard the insult inside it. My schedule is full. I said, I teach 37 students a week. Yes, but lessons can be moved. He said, it is not like you are in court or managing client portfolios. My mother gave me a look that almost passed for pity. Sweetheart, no one is saying your little lessons are not nice. But this is family. Family. Another word people use when they want you to carry something they would never carry for you. I should have pushed back. I should have said that my work mattered. That my time mattered. That loving Grandma did not mean everyone else got to vanish. But I was tired before the battle even started. And the truth was, I wanted to be with Grandma. So I swallowed the anger and said, I will visit her every day. Perfect, my father said. Perfect. Like I had solved a scheduling issue. Not offered my heart. A nurse came to take us back. Her name was Carol, and she had kind eyes, practical shoes, and the calm manner of someone who had seen families behave badly in every possible style. She explained Grandma's medication, visiting hours, what symptoms to expect, and who to call if we had concerns. My father asked about paperwork. My mother asked about private room costs. Megan asked if the hospice had good cell reception. I wish I were exaggerating. When Carol led us into Grandma's room, I forgot all of them for a moment. Grandma Eleanor was propped against white pillows, smaller than she had looked even a week earlier. A soft gray blanket covered her legs. Someone had placed a vase of pale yellow flowers on the windowsill. But beside her bed were the things she must have asked for herself: a stack of books, a bottle of lavender lotion, and her reading glasses folded on top of a worn copy of a Chopin biography. Her face was thin. Her skin looked almost transparent. But when she opened her eyes, she was still there. Sharp. Present. Grandma. Annabelle, she said, and held out her hand. I went to her right away. Her fingers were cold, but she squeezed mine with surprising strength. Hey. Grandma. She studied my face. You drove too fast. I blinked. How do you know that? Because you have your guilty forehead. Behind me. Megan made a small, impatient noise. My mother shifted her purse. My father stepped forward and began speaking in that loud, careful voice people use when they assume sick people have also become foolish. Mother, we are getting everything organized. Grandma looked at him. I am dying. Richard. Not hosting a conference. I pressed my lips together. It was either that or laugh. And laughing during the family hospice meeting seemed like the kind of thing my mother would bring up for the next 20 years. My father's jaw tightened. We only want to make sure you are taken care of. I know who takes care of me, Grandma said. Her eyes moved back to me. The room went still for half a second. My mother recovered first. Annabelle has agreed to visit daily. Has she? Grandma asked. I want to, I said quickly. Really? Grandma's expression softened. I know you do. That was the difference between her and everyone else. She heard the part of me that was true. Not just the part that was convenient. We stayed for less than 20 minutes. My father took a call in the hallway. My mother fussed with the flowers. Megan texted someone with both thumbs, moving at a speed that suggested national security might be involved. When we left the room, Ilingal behint, Grandma caught my wrist. Come tomorrow, she whispered. I will. And bring music. My throat tightened. Always. Out in the hallway. My parents were already walking toward the exit. Megan followed them, laughing quietly at something on her phone. I moved a few steps behind. That was when I heard my mother say, just low enough that she thought I would miss it. At least she is useful for something. I stopped. For 1 second. I considered answering. I pictured myself saying every sharp, honest thing I had swallowed for years. I imagined my mother's face changing. My father turning around. Megan pretending to be shocked like she had not heard worse at brunch. But Grandma was in the next room, so I kept walking. Not because it did not hurt. Because I had learned, over time, that some families do not hear pain unless it becomes inconvenient for them. That night, I went home, made a cup of tea, I forgot to drink, and rearranged my entire teaching schedule. I moved lessons earlier. I gave up lunch breaks. I answered parent emails until my eyes burned. I made room where no one else would. And the next afternoon, I went back to St. Agnes with a tote bag full of sheet music. Leon or Lochon. And the stubborn belief that showing up still mattered. I did not know yet that while I was keeping that promise, my parents were already planning how to break one of Grandma's. By the end of that first week, I had become part of the hospice routine. I knew which hallway light flickered near the vending machines. I knew Nurse Carol took her coffee black and kept peppermint candies in her left pocket. I knew Grandma liked the curtains open in the morning but half closed after lunch because the afternoon glare made her eyes tired. I knew which chair in her room squeaked and which one was safe if you did not want to sound like a dying goose every time you shifted your weight. My parents knew none of that. They called for updates. Though, not warm calls. Not the kind where a son asks how his mother slept or whether she seemed afraid. My father wanted facts. Medication changes. Doctor notes. Estimated timeline. He used words like status and condition. So often, I almost expected him to ask Grandma for a quarterly report. My mother called twice that week. The first time, she asked whether Grandma had mentioned anything important. The second time, she asked if Grandma still seemed clear. Clear. That word bothered me. Clear how? I asked. Oh, Anna, she said, with that tired little laugh she used when she wanted me to feel slow. You know, mentally, she is tired. I said, she is sick. But yes, she is clear. There was a pause. Well, Mom said, that is good. But she did not sound like it was good. At the time, I told myself I was reading too much into it. That is another bad habit you pick up in families like mine. You become so used to swallowing disrespect that when your stomach turns, you blame the stomach. Grandma, meanwhile, was still Grandma. She had weaker days. Of course. Some mornings, she could barely hold a cup of tea. Some afternoons, she drifted in and out of sleep, while I graded lesson notes beside her bed. But when she was awake, her mind was sharp. And her comments were sharper. One afternoon, I read her a message from a student's mother explaining that little Braden had not practiced because he was exploring his relationship with rest. Grandma opened one eye and said, "In my day, we called that lazy." I laughed so hard. Nurse Carol poked her head in to make sure nobody had pulled out a tube. Those visits became the center of my days. I taught lessons. I drove to St. Agnes. I sat with Grandma. I brought old photographs, fresh socks, library books, and once, a chicken pot pie from the diner she liked. Even though Carol made me promise to check the sodium first, Grandma ate 3 bites and declared it better than dying on hospital pudding, which I chose to take as a glowing review. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, Grandma asked me to go to her house. "There is a blue photo box in the upstairs hall closet," she said. "The one with the cracked lid? I want to see the old concert pictures." "Of course," I said. "I can stop by after lessons." She nodded, then watched me a little too closely. "And Annabelle?" "Yes? If anything looks strange, do not let anyone tell you that you imagined it." I looked up from my tote bag. "What does that mean?" "It means I am old, not stupid." I waited for her to explain more, but she closed her eyes, ending the conversation in the way only old women and judges can. So after my last lesson, I drove to Grandma's house in the rain. The sky was gray, the streets slick, and every driver in Pennsylvania seemed to have forgotten how brakes worked. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my shoulders were tight and my shoes were damp. Grandma's house looked the same from the outside. White trim, brick steps, bare rose bushes along the walkway, the porch swing moving a little in the wind. I used my key and stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of lemon polish and lavender. Quiet met me at the door. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. I shook off the feeling and called out, even though I knew no one was there. "Grandma?" "Nothing." I walked through the foyer, past the dining room, toward the staircase. I meant to go straight upstairs for the photo box, but habit pulled my eyes into the living room, and I stopped. The corner by the front window was empty. For a second, my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. I looked at the space where the Steinway had stood for as long as I had been alive, and there was just carpet. Allons. Rectangular shadow pressed into the fibers. A few pale marks on the wall where sunlight had not faded the paint. One tiny brass caster mark near the baseboard. The piano was gone. Not moved a few feet. Not covered. Gone. My keys slipped from my hand and hit the floor. I stood there, staring, waiting for the room to correct itself. Like maybe if I blinked hard enough, the piano would return. Dignified and dark and familiar, sitting exactly where it belonged. But the room stayed wrong. My hands started shaking. I walked to the empty corner and touched the carpet, which was ridiculous, because carpet cannot explain a crime scene. Still, I crouched there, like I might find an answer in the flattened fibers. That was when Grandma's words came back to me. "If anything looks strange, do not let anyone tell you that you imagined it." I pulled out my phone and called my mother. She answered on the 4th ring. "Anna, I am in the middle of something. Where is Grandma's piano?" Silence. Not confusion. Not surprise. Silence. Then she said, "Your father handled it?" My stomach dropped. "Handled what?" "The piano." "How?" Another pause. Shorter this time. Sharper. It was an adult decision. I almost laughed. I really did. There I was, 28 years old, paying my own rent, managing my own business, sitting in a house where a major piece of property had vanished, and my mother was still using the tone people use on toddlers with crayons near a white couch. "Mom, where is it?" "Annabelle, do not start." "Where is the piano?" "It was sold." The word hit me so hard I had to sit back on my heels. "Sold." My mouth went dry. "You sold Grandma's Steinway. Your father sold it?" And, frankly, it was the sensible thing to do. It was just sitting there. Just sitting there. Like it was an old treadmill in a basement. "Grandma promised it to me." My mother sighed. "Grandma says many things. She is very ill. She is not confused." I did not say confused. I said ill. "That piano was hers? And your father is her son?" I stood up slowly. My body felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. Does Grandma know? My mother's voice changed. Do not bring this to her. That was all the answer I needed. She does not know. Anna? Listen to me very carefully. Your grandmother is in hospice. She is fragile. If you upset her over an object, and something happens, that will be on you. An object. I looked at the empty wall. The faded rectangle. The missing shape of my childhood. You mean if I tell her the truth? I mean you need to grow up and understand timing. No. Mom, you mean you sold her piano behind her back? And now you want me to help hide it? Her voice went cold. You always were dramatic. Then she hung up. I stood in that living room with the dead phone pressed to my ear, listening to rain tap against the windows. For a few minutes, I did not move. I did not cry. I think I was past crying. Then I grabbed the blue photo box from upstairs, locked the house, and drove straight to my parents' place. My father opened the door with a glass of scotch in his hand, wearing the mildly annoyed expression of a man interrupted during something very important, like watching cable news and judging everyone on it. The piano, I said. He stared at me. Good evening to you too? What did you do with Grandma's piano? He did not flinch. Sold it? Just like that. No shame. No hesitation. Why? Because it was worth money. I stepped into the foyer without being invited. It was not yours. It was sitting in a house I manage. You do not manage Grandma's memories. His mouth tightened. Do not get sentimental with me. Annabelle. Behind him, I heard heels on hardwood. My mother appeared first, arms folded. Then Megan came around the corner, wearing leggings, a cream sweater, and a smile that told me she already knew. In her hand, she swung a key fob. A Mercedes key fob. My eyes moved from the keys to her face. No, I said. Megan smiled wider. Surprise. I looked at my father. You used the money to buy her a car? A necessary investment? He said. Megan needs to make the right impression. With Daniel's family, my mother added, as if that explained everything. Of course. Daniel Harrison, his parents, their dinners, their country club smiles, their polished world where Megan needed a shiny car more than Grandma needed dignity. How much? I asked. My father took a sip. 95,000. The number landed between us like a body. I looked at Megan. You knew? She shrugged. Daddy said Grandma would want me to have something nice. Grandma promised that piano to me. Megan rolled her eyes. Anna? What were you going to do with it? Put it in your tiny apartment? Teach sticky-fingered kids on a historic Steinway? My mother stepped forward. Your sister has a real future to think about. There it was. The sentence underneath every birthday, every dinner, every choice they had ever made. Megan had a future. I had a schedule. A useful schedule. A flexible schedule. A simple little life where I could be counted on to visit the dying woman while they stripped her house for parts. I looked at each of them, and something inside me went very still. Grandma deserves to know? My mother's face hardened. If you tell her, and the shock hurts her, I will never forgive you. That old threat might have worked on me once. It almost worked then. But I thought of Grandma's hand in mine, her voice telling me not to let anyone convince me. I imagined what was strange. Her trust, her clarity, her promise. No, I said quietly. You do not get to steal from her and make me responsible for the truth. My father's eyes narrowed. Watch your tone. I looked at the Mercedes key fob in Megan's hand, then back at him. For once, Dad, I said, you should watch yours. Then I walked out before any of them could answer. The rain had stopped, but the air felt colder. I sat in my car with both hands on the steering wheel, shaking so hard the keys rattled in the ignition. I had come there, looking for an explanation. I left with a decision. Grandma was going to hear the truth. I drove home with the kind of silence in my car that makes every little sound seem too loud. The turn signal clicked like it had a personal opinion. The heater rattled. My wet shoes squeaked against the floor mat. Somewhere behind me, a driver honked because apparently I had committed the terrible crime of stopping at a yellow light instead of treating it like a dare. Normally, I would have muttered something sarcastic and kept going. That night, I barely noticed. All I could see was that empty rectangle in Grandma's living room, the pale wall where the Steinway had protected the paint from sunlight, the flattened carpet where its legs had stood. The ugly little truth of absence. My parents had not just sold a piano. They had taken the one thing Grandma had clearly chosen, clearly named, and clearly trusted me to protect. Then they used the money to reward Megan for existing near a wealthy boyfriend. And somehow, in my mother's mind, I was the dangerous one. That was the part I could not stop hearing. If you tell her, and the shock hurts her, I will never forgive you. The sentence followed me into my apartment. It followed me while I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door. It followed me while I stood in my little kitchen, staring at the refrigerator, like it might offer legal advice. It followed me while I made tea and forgot the mug on the counter until it went cold. My apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I used to like that about it. After teaching kids all day, quiet felt like a blessing. No one demanding dinner. No one judging my shoes. No Megan drifting through the room acting like basic responsibility was a medical condition. But that night, the quiet felt like a courtroom. And I was both witness and defendant. Was my mother right? That question made me hate myself a little. Because I already knew she was not trustworthy. Diane Thompson could make a guilt trip out of a grocery receipt. Still, fear does not always care about logic. Grandma was in hospice. She was weak. Her heart was failing. What if hearing the truth hurt her? What if the stress made her worse? What if I walked into that room, told her what her son had done, and watched the light leave her face? I sat on the edge of my couch and pressed my hands together until my fingers ached. The old Annabelle knew what to do. Stay quiet. Smile tightly. Protect everyone else from consequences. Turn pain into politeness and call it maturity. I had done it my whole life. When my parents skipped my college recital because Megan had broken up with a boyfriend she had dated for 3 weeks, I said I understood. When my father forgot my birthday dinner and then complained that I looked disappointed, I apologized for making it awkward. When my mother made jokes about my little teaching career in front of relatives, I laughed along because if I did not, someone would say, I was sensitive. Sensitive. That family word for, please stop noticing how we treat you. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Grandma would know. Not because I told her, necessarily. Because Grandma noticed what other people tried to hide. She had heard the odd pauses. She had seen my mother's questions. She had probably already sensed the shape of the lie, even if she did not know the details. And she had warned me, if anything looks strange, do not let anyone tell you that you imagined it. That was not a casual sentence. Grandma did not throw words around like confetti at a parade. If she said that, she had a reason. I got up and walked to the bookshelf near my window. On the second shelf was a framed photograph of Grandma from her final concert, taken almost 20 years earlier. She sat at the Steinway in a black dress, her silver hair pinned back, her hands resting just above the keys. She looked calm, ready, like she knew exactly what she was about to do. I picked up the frame. What am I supposed to do? I whispered. Of course. The photograph did not answer. It had manners. But I remembered something Grandma had told me when I was 12. I had failed a math test. Not a little failed. Hide this paper before it files charges, failed. I was terrified to tell my parents. Because my father treated bad grades like signs of moral collapse. And my mother had a way of sighing that made you feel like you had personally aged her. So I told Grandma first. She listened, looked at the test, and said, well, that is not ideal. I cried. She handed me a tissue and let me finish. Then she said, truth can wound, Annabelle. But lies always wound deeper. They just take longer. At 12, I thought she was talking about math. Now I understood she was talking about life. If I stayed silent, Grandma might have peace for a day or two, maybe even a week. But it would be fake peace. A padded room built out of lies. My parents would keep smiling. Megan would keep driving that ridiculous car. And Grandma would leave this world, believing her wishes had been honored. Was that kindness? Or was that theft with nicer lighting? I set the photograph back on the shelf and sat down at my small dining table. There were lesson invoices stacked beside a grocery list, a chipped blue mug, and a notebook where I kept teaching notes. Ordinary things. My ordinary life? The life my parents called small, but it was mine. I had built it without their approval, without their money, without a Mercedes parked out front like a shiny personality replacement. And for the first time in a long time, that mattered to me. My phone buzzed. A text from Megan. Don't make this into a whole thing. Grandma doesn't need drama right now. I stared at it. Then another message came in. Also, the car is already registered, so it's done anyway. There it was. Compassion. Megan style. Half warning. Half receipt. I almost typed back. I almost wrote something sharp. Something about how the only thing she had ever earned was the ability to make selfishness sound like a lifestyle brand. Instead, I put the phone face down. Arguing with Megan was like playing piano for a cat. Technically possible, but no one involved grows from the experience. Around midnight, I tried to sleep. That lasted about 11 minutes. I lay there in the dark, while every memory lined up for inspection. My father saying, "Teachers do not exactly work overtime." My mother saying, "At least she is useful for something." Megan swinging those keys. Grandma's hand in mine. By 2 in the morning. I had made a cup of coffee, because apparently my body had decided we were not sleeping, and might as well become legally caffeinated. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote down what I knew. Grandma promised me the piano. My parents sold it without asking her. They received $95,000. They used the money to buy Megan a Mercedes. Grandma does not know. Mom threatened me to keep me quiet. Seeing it written out made it harder to excuse. There was no emotional fog on the page. No family politics. No, maybe they meant well. Just facts. Ugly. Simple facts. And underneath them, I wrote one more sentence. Grandma deserves the truth. I looked at that sentence for a long time. Then I added another. So do I. That one surprised me. Because this was not only about Grandma. I wanted it to be. It would have been easier if I could pretend I was being noble and selfless and saintly. Like one of those women in church stories who never gets angry, and probably irons pillowcases for fun. But I was angry. I was angry that my parents had trained me to question my own judgment. Angry that Megan could take what was not hers and still act inconvenienced. Angry that I had spent 28 years auditioning for basic respect from people who had no intention of giving it. And I was tired. Not sleepy tired. Bone tired. Soul tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying peace for people who keep starting fires. By 3 in the morning, the decision felt solid. I would go to St. Agnes before my first lesson. I would tell Grandma everything. Not dramatically. Not cruelly. Not with extra seasoning. As my grandmother would say, just the truth. If she became upset, I would stay with her. If she cried, I would hold her hand. If she got angry, I would let her be angry. Because anger would belong to her. So would grief. So would the choice of what came next. My parents had taken enough from her. They did not get to take her right to know. At 5:30, I finally showered. The hot water helped a little. I dressed carefully. Not fancy, but neat. Navy slacks. Cream sweater. Comfortable shoes. I packed my teaching bag. Then added the blue photo box from Grandma's house. I had almost forgotten it in the shock of everything. But I brought it because she had asked. And in that moment, keeping even one promise felt important. The sun was barely up when I drove to hospice. Morning traffic was light. A few delivery trucks. A school bus. People walking dogs in jackets. Holding coffee. Living normal lives. While mine felt like it had split open, St. Agnes was quiet when I arrived. The lobby lights were soft. The receptionist nodded when she saw me. Early today, she said. Couldn't sleep. She gave me the kind of look people give when they know enough not to ask. Nurse Carol was coming out of Grandma's room as I reached the hallway. She's awake, Carol said. A little tired, but clear. There was that word again. Clear. This time, it steadied me. I stepped into the room. Grandma was propped against her pillows, watching the pale morning light through the window. Her hair had been brushed back neatly. The lavender lotion sat on the bedside table. Her glasses rested beside a book she had probably opened, and then judged for being poorly written. She turned when she heard me. "You look like trouble," she said. My throat tightened so fast I almost smiled. "I feel like trouble." "Good," she said softly. "Sometimes trouble is just truth arriving without an invitation." I sat in the chair beside her bed and took her hand. Her fingers curled around mine. "Grandma," I said, my voice low, "I have to tell you something. And it is going to hurt." She studied my face. No fear. No confusion. Just that steady Eleanor Whitmore attention that had carried me through childhood. "Then tell me," she said. So I did. I told her about the empty living room, the missing Steinway, the phone call with my mother, the $95,000, the Mercedes, Megan's keys, my father's pride, my mother's threat. I did not dress it up. I did not soften the parts that made them look bad. I did not make myself smaller to make the truth easier to swallow. When I finished, the room was completely quiet. I braced myself for tears, for shock, for heartbreak. Grandma closed her eyes and took one long, slow breath. Then she opened them, looked straight at me, and said, "Hand me my phone, sweetheart." That was when I realized my grandmother was not surprised. Not even a little. I reached for her phone before my mind had caught up with what was happening. It was sitting on the little table beside her bed, next to her lavender lotion, her reading glasses, and a half-finished cup of tea that Nurse Carol kept reheating with the loyalty of a woman fighting a losing war against room temperature. I picked it up and placed it in Grandma's hand. Her fingers were thin and unsteady, but there was nothing weak about her face. That was the first thing that scared me. Not that she looked broken, that she did not. She looked calm. Too calm. The way she used to look before correcting someone who had made the mistake of lying to her face. "Grandma," I said carefully, "did you understand what I just told you?" She gave me a look. Even dying, Eleanor Whitmore could make me feel like I had asked whether water was wet. "Yes, Annabelle." I understood. "They sold the piano. I heard you. For Megan's car, I heard that too. And Mom threatened me so I would not tell you." Her mouth tightened a little. Not with surprise, with confirmation. I expected something like that. I stared at her. "You expected this?" I hoped I was wrong. That answer landed harder than if she had cried. She unlocked her phone slowly, her thumb moving with care. I watched her scroll through her contacts. She was not searching randomly. She knew exactly who she wanted. "Grandma, who are you calling? An old friend?" She pressed the number and put the phone to her ear. Her hand trembled, so I reached out to help. But she shook her head once. 3 rings. Then a man's voice answered. Deep, steady, and older. "Eleanor? Harold," she said. "It is time." There was a pause on the other end. Not confusion. Not a request for explanation. Just a pause from someone who already knew what those words meant. "I understand," he said. "Are you certain?" "My son sold the Steinway." Another pause. Shorter this time. "I am sorry." "Sorry," Grandma said. "But I am done being disappointed quietly." I sat frozen beside the bed. Done being disappointed quietly. If there had ever been a family motto for every woman who smiled through bad behavior until she ran out of patience, that was it. "When?" the man asked. "Sunday," Grandma said. "Diane's birthday party? At the house." "The house?" he asked. "The house," she repeated. Something in the way she said it made my stomach tighten. "I will prepare the documents," Harold said. "Do you want me to notify Richard beforehand?" "No." That one word was so firm even the air seemed to sit up straight. "No warning," she continued. "He has had years of warning. He called them chances. I will be there." "And Harold?" "Yes? Bring everything." "I will." Grandma ended the call and lowered the phone to her lap. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Outside the window, a groundskeeper pushed a cart along the walkway. Somewhere down the hall, a nurse laughed softly. Life kept moving in that ordinary way it does, even when yours has just tipped sideways. "Who is Harold?" I asked. "Harold Jennings," Grandma said. My attorney. I blinked. You have an attorney? She turned her head slowly and looked at me. Annabelle. I am not a houseplant. I know. I just. You thought your father handled everything? I did not answer. Because yes, that was exactly what I had thought. Not because my father deserved that trust, but because he acted like he owned every room he entered. Men like Richard Thompson do not simply manage paperwork. They perform authority until everyone else gets tired and lets them. Grandma leaned back against her pillows. Your grandfather trusted Harold. I trust Harold. Richard trusts Richard, which has always been part of the problem. Despite everything. I almost laughed. Grandma, what is going on? She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. When she opened them again, the sharpness was still there. But underneath it was exhaustion. I have been preparing for this for 5 years. Preparing for what? For the possibility that my son would prove he cared more about appearances than people. I shook my head slightly. 5 years? Yes. But why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to be wrong. Her voice cracked on the last word. And that was the first time I saw the hurt beneath the calm. Not shock, not panic. Hurt. The deep kind. The kind that comes from watching someone become exactly who you prayed they would never become. I loved your father, she said quietly. I still do. That is the ugly part people do not like to admit. Love does not turn off just because someone disappoints you. Sometimes love sits right beside anger and makes the whole thing harder. I held her hand tighter. She looked toward the window. When your grandfather died, Richard changed. Or maybe he stopped hiding who he already was. He became obsessed with status. The house. The business. The right friends. The right clubs. The right car in the driveway. Your mother encouraged it because Diane has always mistaken being admired for being loved. That was a sentence I would be thinking about for the rest of my life. And Megan? I asked. Grandma Sahil. Megan was raised to believe attention was the same as affection. That is not entirely her fault. But she is old enough now to know better. I nodded, though my chest still felt tight. And me? Grandma turned back to me. You were raised to be convenient. The words were simple, direct. They hurt because they were true. You were the child who did not demand too much, she said. The one who adjusted. The one who helped. The one they could ignore and still count on. That is a terrible thing to do to a child. My eyes burned. I thought if I was easier, they would eventually notice. I know. They didn't. No, she said softly. They used it. I looked down at our hands. Hers felt so light in mine. But her grip was steady. Grandma, what did you do? I protected what I could. That does not answer the question. It answers enough for today. That sounded exactly like her. And it annoyed me exactly as much as it comforted me. I am not a child. No, she said. You are a grown woman, who still thinks she has to earn permission to stand up straight. So I am going to give you one clear instruction. I swallowed. Okay. Come to your mother's birthday party on Sunday. I stared at her. You want me to go? Yes. To Mom's birthday party. Yes. At your house. At my house? She said. And again, there was that weight in the words. My thoughts started moving too fast. Diane's birthday party had been planned for weeks. My mother turning 60 was apparently important enough to require catered food, fresh flowers, and a guest list that included neighbors, relatives, and my father's business connections. She had mentioned it 3 times. Each time with the seriousness of a state ceremony. I do not think they want me there. I said, they will want an audience. Grandma said, they always do. That was true. My parents loved an audience. They liked polished rooms, raised glasses, and people nodding, while Richard told stories that made him sound wiser than he was. They liked generosity when it could be photographed. They liked family when it behaved. What is going to happen? Harold will explain some things. What things? Important things. Grandma. Annabelle. We looked at each other. She won. Of course. She had 76 years of practice. Finally. She squeezed my hand. I need you to listen to me carefully. On Sunday, do not argue first. Do not defend yourself first. Let them show everyone who they are. People like your father survive because others clean up the evidence before anyone sees it. This time, we will not clean. A chill moved through me. I am scared, I admitted. I know. What if they blame me? They will. That was not comforting. What if everyone believes them? They will try. Also not comforting. Grandma's expression softened. But truth does not need everyone to clap for it. It only needs to be spoken clearly. I looked away because if I looked at her too long, I was going to cry. And I did not want to spend one more minute making my grief the loudest thing in that room. She tugged lightly on my hand. Annabelle. I looked back. You are not the villain in this story. The sentence broke something open in me, because that was exactly what my mother had tried to make me feel like. The villain. The difficult daughter. The jealous sister. The selfish granddaughter who might upset a dying woman over an object. Grandma saw it. She saw all of it. I do not want revenge. I whispered. Good, she said. Revenge is noisy and usually badly dressed. I let out a shaky laugh. What I want, she continued, is accountability. Your father needs consequences. Your mother needs a mirror. Megan needs to learn that a gift stolen from someone else is not love. And you need to learn that mercy does not mean silence. That was the lesson right there. Not the kind you stitch on a pillow and sell at a craft fair. The real kind. The kind that costs something. Grandma's breathing grew heavier. And I saw the effort it took for her to keep talking. You will dress nicely, she said. I will. You will arrive on time. I will. You will not apologize for being there. I hesitated. Her eyebrow lifted. I will not apologize. I said, good. She closed her eyes. For a moment, I thought she had fallen asleep. Then she whispered, and bring your patience? My patience? Yes. The kind I taught you when you were learning Chopin and wanted to throw the sheet music across the room. I never threw it. You threatened it with your eyes. That time I did laugh. A real laugh. Small, but real. Then she opened her eyes one more time. I am sorry it took me this long. I shook my head. Grandma? No. Yes, she said. I watched too much. I excused too much. I told myself your father would soften with age. Instead, he became a man who sold his mother's piano to buy his daughter a hood ornament. That was so accurate I almost felt bad for laughing again. Almost. I cannot fix every hurt, she said, but I can make sure they do not profit from this one. Her eyes closed again. And this time she did drift off, her hand still resting in mine. I sat there beside her, listening to the quiet rhythm of her breathing. With her phone still warm on the blanket, and the name Harold Jennings burned into my mind. By the time Nurse Carol stepped in to check on her, I had stopped shaking. Not because I understood the plan. I did not. Not because I felt brave. I definitely did not. But because for the first time in my life, someone powerful was standing on the side of the truth. And on Sunday, my parents were going to find out that Grandma Eleanor had never been as helpless as they thought. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of cold, bright sunlight that makes everything look cleaner than it really is. I woke up before my alarm, which was rude because I had spent most of the night trying to convince my brain that sleep was not a government conspiracy. My body was tired. My eyes felt gritty. And my stomach had the confidence of a paper bag in a rainstorm. But I got up anyway. Grandma had given me 3 instructions. Dress nicely. Arrive on time. Do not apologize for being there. That last one turned out to be the hardest. I stood in front of my closet longer than any grown woman should stand in front of a closet. I was not trying to impress my mother. That ship had sailed. Hit a rock. And probably been judged for not sinking elegantly enough. But I needed armor. Not the loud kind. Not sequins. Not red lipstick. Not anything that said, please notice me. I needed something that said, I know why I am here. And I am not leaving just because you get uncomfortable. I chose a navy blue dress. Simple and fitted. With long sleeves and a hem that hit just below my knees. I wore the pearl earrings Grandma had given me on my 21st birthday. She had said they made me look like someone who could handle a room full of fools without raising her voice. At the time, I thought that was just a compliment. Now it felt like training. I pinned my hair back, put on low heels, and looked at myself in the mirror. "You are not the villain," I said quietly. It sounded strange out loud. A little dramatic. Like something from a courthouse movie where everyone has perfect lighting and no one ever loses their keys, but I needed to hear it, so I said it again. "You are not the villain." Then I picked up my coat and left. The drive to Grandma's house took 20 minutes. I knew every turn by heart. The pharmacy on the corner. The church with the message board that always tried too hard. The diner where Grandma once sent back soup because, according to her, warm salt water with a carrot in it was not lunch. The closer I got, the more cars I saw parked along the street. My mother's birthday party had not been planned as a small family gathering. Of course not. Diane Thompson did not turn 60 quietly. That would have required humility. And I was pretty sure she considered humility something other people used when they could not afford catering. There were cars lining both sides of the curb. A black Lexus, 2 SUVs, my uncle's pickup truck, a few sedans I recognized from my father's business circle, and in the driveway, taking up attention, like it had been trained for it, sat Megan's new silver Mercedes. Red bow on the hood, because apparently subtlety had died before Grandma did. I parked at the end of the block and sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. The house looked festive from the outside. A banner hung across the porch railing that read, "Happy 60th birthday, Diane." There were white balloons tied to the posts, because my mother believed balloons could be classy if you bought enough of them. Through the front window, I could see people moving around inside, holding drinks, smiling, leaning close for gossip. Nobody walking into that house knew they were standing on the edge of a family earthquake. Or maybe some of them did. In families, people often know more than they admit. They just prefer not to stand too close to the mess unless dessert is involved. I checked my phone. No messages from Harold. No messages from Grandma. One from Megan, sent 20 minutes earlier. "Please don't be weird today. Mom deserves a nice party." I stared at it for half a second, then locked the screen. That was Megan in one sentence. "Sto limpiano." A dying grandmother. A luxury car bought with dirty money. And somehow the emergency was whether I might be weird near the birthday cake. I got out of the car. The air was sharp enough to make my cheeks sting. I walked up the sidewalk slowly, careful on the front steps because my mother would have noticed if I slipped, and I refused to give her slapstick material on top of everything else. Before I could knock, the door opened. My father stood there in a dark suit, holding a crystal glass. For 1 second, we just looked at each other. His eyes dropped to my dress, then to my earrings, then back to my face. "You came?" he said. That was not a greeting. It was an accusation wearing shoes. I was invited. I said, technically. Grandma had told me to come. Good enough. His mouth tightened. "Do not make today difficult." I was about to say the same thing. His eyes narrowed. And for a moment I saw the old pattern preparing itself. He would warn me. I would soften. He would decide the room belonged to him. But I did not soften. I stepped past him into the house. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Catered food. Expensive perfume. Coffee. Flowers. And underneath all of it, the familiar lemon polish of Grandma's furniture. The house was full of people. Around 30. Maybe a few more. Relative. Neighbors. My parents' friends. 2 of my father's business associates. And, near the fireplace, James Harrison with his son Daniel. Megan stood beside Daniel, like she had been positioned there for photographs. Cream dress. Curled hair. Diamond bracelet my parents had probably called a little something. She saw me and smiled. Not warmly, strategically. "Anna," she said, gliding over with a glass of champagne in her hand. "You made it?" "I did." She leaned in, air kissed near my cheek, and whispered, "Please behave." I smiled back. "That depends on everyone else." Her eyes flashed. But before she could answer, my mother swept in. Diane Thompson at 60 looked exactly like Diane Thompson wanted to look at 60. Polished. Expensive. And allergic to reality. She wore a red designer dress, gold earrings, and the bright smile she saved for rooms where witnesses were present. Annabelle, she said, touching my arm lightly. How nice. My mother had a gift for making how nice sound like, who let you in? Happy birthday. Mom. Thank you. Her eyes moved to my pearls. Those are Eleanor's. She gave them to me. Yes, she said. She was always generous. The word hung there between us. Generous. My mother used it so casually, I almost admired the nerve. Almost. Then I remembered the Mercedes in the driveway, and decided admiration was too strong. Maybe medical curiosity was closer. Across the room, I saw Aunt Margaret standing near the dining table. Grandma's younger sister was smaller than Grandma, softer around the edges. But her eyes were the same sharp gray. She caught sight of me and came over at once. Anna? Sweetheart. She hugged me tightly. How is Eleanor? Tired? I said. But clear? Aunt Margaret held my gaze for a beat. She knew something was wrong. Maybe not all of it, but enough. I spoke to her this morning, she said. She sounded determined. That sounds like her. Aunt Margaret glanced toward the living room, and I followed her gaze. The corner by the front window was still empty. Someone had placed a tall potted plant where the Steinway used to be. A big glossy thing in a ceramic pot. Probably chosen by my mother, because it filled the space without asking questions. It looked absurd, like putting a houseplant over a missing tooth. Aunt Margaret's expression changed. Where is the piano? Before I could answer, my father's voice rose from the center of the room. Everyone, if I could have your attention. Please. The conversation softened. Glasses were lifted. People turned toward him automatically. Because Richard Thompson knew how to command a room. I had seen him do it my entire life. Shoulders back. Chin lifted. One hand in his pocket. The other holding a drink like a prop in a commercial for confidence. My mother moved beside him, glowing under the attention. I want to thank all of you for being here, my father said. Today, we celebrate 60 wonderful years of my beautiful wife. Diane. Applause filled the room. My mother smiled modestly, which was impressive, considering modesty was not one of her natural settings. For those of you who know Diane, he continued, you know family has always been the center of her life. I nearly coughed. Aunt Margaret's hand found my wrist. Probably because she sensed I was about to make a noise that would not help anyone. My father kept going, and in that spirit, we also have something special to share today. As many of you know, our daughter Megan has been building a wonderful future with Daniel Harrison. Daniel smiled politely. James Harrison nodded once. The way business people do when emotions are happening nearby, and they are hoping to invoice someone for it. Megan represents the next chapter of this family, my father said, and thanks to the generosity of my mother, Eleanor, we were able to give her a gift that reflects that bright future. My stomach turned. There it was. He was really going to do it. He was going to drag Grandma's name into the lie in front of everyone. Come outside, he said, smiling wide. We want you all to see. People laughed, murmured, and began moving toward the front door. My mother looked delighted. Megan pressed a hand to her chest as if surprised, which would have been more convincing if she had not texted me about the car being registered. I stayed still for half a second. Then Aunt Margaret leaned close and whispered, Anna? I said quietly. He sold the Steinway. Her face went pale. For that car? I nodded. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Outside, the guests gathered around the driveway. The Mercedes gleamed in the sunlight. Silver paint polished. Red bow bright against the hood. Megan stepped beside it, smiling for photos. My father raised his glass. A gift made possible by Eleanor's love for her family, he announced. She wanted Megan to have every opportunity. Megan squealed and hugged him. People clapped. Someone said, How generous. Someone else said, What a beautiful car. I stood on the porch, hands cold, heart pounding, watching my father rewrite theft into generosity, while my grandmother lay in hospice. Then Megan turned toward me. Anna, she called sweetly, loud enough for several people to hear. Come take a picture. Don't be jealous. I'm sure Grandma will leave you something too. A few people chuckled. Maybe some old sheet music, she added. More laughter. Nervous laughter. Mostly, the kind people make when cruelty is dressed up as a joke, and they do not want to be rude by noticing. I looked at her standing beside that car, wearing triumph like perfume. For once, I did not feel small. I felt clear. Behind me, inside the house, I heard the faint click of a briefcase opening, and I knew Harold Jennings had arrived. The sound of that briefcase latch steadied me more than any pep talk ever could. People were still gathered around the Mercedes, smiling in the cold sunlight, while my sister posed like she had just won a pageant for most rewarded adult child. My father stood beside her with one hand on the hood of the car, proud as a man unveiling a hospital wing instead of a luxury vehicle bought with stolen trust and bad judgment. I stayed on the porch, watching. Aunt Margaret stood next to me, her face tight and pale. "Anna," she said under her breath. "Does Eleanor know?" "She knows now." Aunt Margaret closed her eyes for half a second. When she opened them, they looked sharper, more like Grandma's. "Did Richard ask her permission?" "No." Her mouth pressed into a thin line. My mother noticed us talking and gave me a look from across the driveway. The kind of look that said, "Do not embarrass me in front of people who matter." That was the funny part about my family. They were never worried about doing the wrong thing. They were worried about the wrong person noticing. My father clinked his glass lightly with a spoon. "Everyone, let's come back inside for cake," he announced. "Diane has been very patient. And we all know that does not happen often." The guests laughed. My mother smiled, pleased by the joke because it made her sound charming instead of controlling. Megan gave one last little wave beside the Mercedes, then turned toward the house, Daniel walking beside her with the careful smile of a man already calculating exit routes. As people filed past me into the foyer, I felt my pulse in my throat. I had no idea what Harold was about to reveal. Grandma had not told me the details, and I understood why now. If I had known, I might have looked too ready, too guilty, too much like the villain my mother wanted me to be. Instead, I looked exactly how I felt. Hurt, tired, done. My father entered last. Still glowing from his performance, he leaned close as he passed me. "See," he murmured. "That is how family handles things. With grace." I looked at him. "You might want to save that word. You are going to need it." His smile faltered. Before he could answer, Aunt Margaret stepped into his path. "Richard." My father turned, irritation flashing across his face before he covered it. "Margaret, can this wait? We are about to cut the cake." "No," she said. "It cannot." The nearby conversation softened. People sensed a shift. Maybe it was her tone. Maybe it was my father's face. Maybe everybody had been waiting for someone to admit the air smelled like gasoline. Aunt Margaret stood straight, one hand resting on the back of a dining chair. "Did you ask Eleanor before you sold that piano?" The room changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but you could feel it. Glasses stopped halfway to mouths. A woman near the doorway paused with her coat still over her arm. "Mister." Harrison turned his head. My father's expression hardened. "This is not the time." "It seems like exactly the time." Aunt Margaret said, "You just told everyone Eleanor sold her piano out of generosity. I am asking if that is true." My mother stepped forward quickly. "Margaret, please. This is my birthday." Aunt Margaret looked at her. "Then what a shame Richard chose today to lie in front of all your guests." A small gasp came from somewhere near the fireplace. My mother's face went red. My father lowered his glass. "Mother is in hospice," he said, his voice calm but tight. "She is not in a position to make practical decisions. I made one for the family." "For the family?" Aunt Margaret repeated. "Or for Megan's image?" Megan's mouth fell open. "Excuse me?" Nobody answered her. That was new. My father looked around and realized people were listening now. "Really listening. This is a private matter," he said. A smooth voice came from behind us. "Actually, given the circumstances, it is no longer private." Harold Jennings stepped into the living room with a folder in one hand and his leather briefcase on the table behind him. He was exactly as I remembered from the law office. Silver hair, gold-rimmed glasses, dark suit, calm enough to make everyone else look guilty just by comparison. My father stared at him. "Who are you?" Harold gave a polite nod. "Harold Jennings. I represent Eleanor Whitmore." The silence that followed was beautiful. Not kind, not comfortable, but beautiful, in the way a fire alarm is beautiful when the building really is on fire. My mother recovered first. "Eleanor has an attorney?" Harold looked at her. "For over 30 years? Mrs. Thompson. I also represented her late husband." My father's face shifted. Not much, but enough. Confusion. Anger. Fear trying to hide behind pride. "What is this about?" he demanded. Harold opened the folder. "Eleanor asked me to attend today because recent events have made it necessary to clarify several legal matters regarding her property and estate." "My mother is dying," my father snapped. "Whatever she told you." "She is emotional. I visited her this morning," Harold said. "Her nurse was present. Eleanor is physically weak, but mentally competent, and fully aware of her decisions." My mother folded her arms. "That is your opinion. It is also the opinion of her attending physician," Harold said evenly. "Documented this morning?" That shut her mouth. A few guests exchanged glances. Aunt Margaret moved closer to me and slipped her hand around mine. Harold walked toward the empty corner where the Steinway had once stood. He paused there for a moment, as if giving the room a chance to notice what was missing. Then he faced everyone. "Let's begin with the house." My father's eyes narrowed. "What house?" "This house," Harold said. A strange little laugh escaped my mother. "What does the house have to do with anything?" "Quite a lot." Harold removed a document from the folder and held it up. "This is the current deed to the property located here in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. The same property where we are standing at this moment." My father took a step forward. "Put that away." Harold did not move. "The deed lists one owner, Eleanor Whitmore." The room went silent again. But this time it was heavier. My mother blinked. "That cannot be right." "It is right. We have lived here for 10 years, she said. "Yes," Harold replied. "You have. My husband's mother gave us this house." "No," Harold said. "She allowed you to live in it?" My father's jaw worked like he was chewing on words too bitter to swallow. "She told me it was ours. She told you that you could live here while you rebuilt your finances after your failed expansion." Harold said. "She never transferred ownership. Not by sale. Not by gift. Not through trust. Not through any legal instrument." I looked at my father. Failed expansion. That was new. Judging by the way Mr. Harrison's eyebrows lifted. It was new to several people. Harold placed a copy of the deed on the dining table. "Anyone who wishes to review the public record may do so. It is simple enough to verify." My mother looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. "But we paid for improvements," she said. "The lighting, the patio, the kitchen work, without written authorization." Harold said, "Those improvements are now part of the property." "That is absurd." "That is property law." A man near the doorway coughed into his hand. I could not tell if he was uncomfortable or trying not to laugh. Maybe both. My father pointed a finger at Harold. "You come into my home." "Eleanor's home," Harold corrected. My father froze. The correction was quiet, but it hit harder than shouting. Harold continued. "For 10 years. Eleanor paid the property taxes. Eleanor carried the insurance. Eleanor maintained the legal ownership. You and your wife resided here rent-free as guests under a revocable arrangement." "Guests?" my mother whispered. "Tenants at will would be the more accurate legal term." Megan looked from my father to my mother. "Dad?" He did not answer. His face had gone pale. And for the first time in my life, Richard Thompson looked smaller than the room he was standing in. Harold turned slightly, making sure the guests could hear him clearly. Eleanor had hoped this arrangement would remain a private family matter. But when her property was misrepresented, and when an asset from that property was sold without her authorization, she instructed me to clarify the truth. Mr. Harrison took a slow step away from my father. It was subtle, but everyone saw it. My father saw it too. "James," he said quickly, "this is a misunderstanding." Mr. Harrison did not respond. That silence probably cost my father more than any insult could have. My mother gripped the back of a chair. Eleanor would not humiliate us like this. Harold looked at her, and for the first time, his voice carried something colder. Mrs. Thompson. Eleanor did not sell a family heirloom behind anyone's back. She did not use the proceeds to purchase a car. She did not announce a false story in front of guests. The humiliation was already in the room. I am only identifying it. Nobody moved. Nobody even pretended to need cake anymore. My father's eyes cut to me. You, he said. One word. Full of blame. I met his stare. For once, I did not look away. Harold stepped between us just enough to break the line of attack. And Richard? He said. Before you choose to accuse anyone else, I recommend you listen carefully. The house is only the first matter Eleanor asked me to address. My mother's lips parted. Megan clutched Daniel's arm. My father stood there in Grandma's living room, surrounded by guests, business partners, relatives, and the empty space where the piano used to be. For the first time all day, he had nothing to say, and Harold was not finished. Harold reached into his folder again, and the sound of paper sliding against paper seemed louder than it should have. Nobody interrupted him this time. That alone told me the room had changed. 10 minutes earlier, my father had owned that room, or at least he had believed he did. He had moved through it with his glass raised and his shoulders squared, letting people admire the version of our family he had polished for public display. Now he stood beside my mother's untouched birthday cake, looking like a man who had just discovered the ground under his feet, had a receipt, and his name was not on it. Harold removed a thick document with a blue cover. Now, he said, we need to discuss the trust. My father's head snapped up. What trust? Harold looked at him over the top of his glasses. The Eleanor Whitmore Family Preservation Trust. My mother made a small sound, almost a laugh, but there was no confidence in it. I have never heard of that. No, Harold said. You have not. That was it. No apology. No explanation to soften the blow. Just the clean, polite fact that nobody had invited Diane Thompson into the room where the real decisions were made. My father took a step forward. Mother never mentioned a trust. She was not required to. I am Hare's son. And yet, Harold said, that does not make you the owner of her property, her assets, or her decisions. A few people looked down at their drinks. Aunt Margaret squeezed my hand. I could feel her breathing beside me, slow and controlled, like she was trying not to say something that would get repeated at every family gathering until the end of time. Harold opened the document. 5 years ago, Eleanor created this trust, after several concerns arose regarding the way certain family members were treating her property and assuming access to her estate. My father's face darkened. That is ridiculous. Harold did not look up. She was particularly concerned about entitlement, financial pressure, and what she described as a growing belief that her belongings were already available for distribution before her death. The room got even quieter. That sentence had teeth. I thought about all the little comments over the years. My mother saying Grandma did not need a house that large anymore. My father asking about simplifying her accounts. Megan joking that old people always had better jewelry than young people who could actually use it. I had heard those comments and brushed them away because families say ugly things casually. That does not make them harmless. It just means they have had practice. Harold turned a page. The trust is irrevocable. It was properly executed, witnessed, notarized, and reviewed at regular intervals. Eleanor reaffirmed its terms 6 months ago. Again, 3 months ago. And again this morning. My mother stared at him. This morning? Yes, Harold said. She was very clear. Megan's voice came from near the fireplace. Thin and sharp. Clear because Anna got to her first. Every head turned toward me. There it was. The accusation I had known was coming. My sister's face was wet with tears now, but her eyes were hard. Daniel stood half a step away from her, and that half step said plenty. James Harrison stood near the mantel with both hands folded in front of him, watching like a man silently canceling dinner reservations. Megan pointed at me. She has always been jealous of me. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was so predictable. It could have arrived with tracking information. Harold raised one hand. Miss Thompson, I advise you to be careful. Accusing someone of undue influence without evidence is serious. She told Grandma about the piano. Megan said, Yes. Harold replied. She told Eleanor the truth. That is not undue influence. That is information. My father jumped in. Annabelle manipulated a dying woman. The words hit the room hard. For 1 second. The old part of me flinched. The trained part. The part that still heard my father's anger and wanted to shrink before the blow landed. But then I remembered Grandma's voice. You are not the villain in this story. Harold's tone turned cold. Richard. Eleanor made these arrangements 5 years ago. Unless Annabelle owns a time machine, which would be impressive on a piano teacher's income. Your claim has no foundation. Someone near the back coughed into a napkin. It might have been a laugh. Under different circumstances, I would have appreciated Harold's delivery. The man could cut a throat with a legal sentence and still sound like he was asking for tea. He continued. The trust assigns several assets to a single beneficiary. The real property we are currently standing in. Eleanor's remaining financial accounts. Personal effects of sentimental value. And specifically, the 1892 Steinway piano, formerly located in this room. Formerly. The word landed in the empty corner. My mother's face went pale. Megan shook her head. No. No. That cannot be right. Harold looked directly at me. The sole beneficiary is Annabelle Rose Thompson. The room stopped breathing. At least, that was how it felt. I heard nothing for a moment. Not the refrigerator in the kitchen. Not the cars outside. Not even my own heartbeat. I just stood there with Aunt Margaret's hand wrapped around mine, staring at Harold as if he had spoken in another language. Me. The house. The accounts. The personal items. The piano. Grandma had chosen me. Not quietly. Not casually. Legally. Megan screamed first. Of course she did. What? She cried. Everything? She gets everything? My mother turned toward me, eyes wide with something that looked almost like hatred. You did this? I shook my head. I did not even know. You expect us to believe that? She snapped. You have been sitting at that hospice center every day, whispering in her ear. I felt the room turn toward me again. Waiting. I could have defended myself with panic. I could have talked too fast. Explained too much. Begged them to understand. That was the old habit. If someone accused me, I tried to become smaller, softer, easier to believe. Not this time. I sat with her. I said. I read to her. I brought her photographs. I held her hand when she was tired. If that looks suspicious to you, maybe that says more about what you think family means than it says about me. Aunt Margaret whispered. Good girl. My father looked at Harold. This will be challenged. You are free to try. Harold said. But I would not recommend it. The trust is solid. And Eleanor documented her reasoning extensively. Her reasoning? My father asked. Yes. Harold removed another page. She wrote that Annabelle showed consistent care, respect, and understanding toward items and memories that others treated as disposable. She also wrote that Richard and Diane had repeatedly acted as if future inheritance was a promise rather than a possibility. My mother's lips parted, but no words came out. That might have been the first miracle of the day. Harold turned one more page. Now we come to the sale of the Steinway. Megan wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. It is already sold, she said. You cannot just undo that. No, Harold said. The sale itself may not be reversible. I am currently tracking the buyer. However, since the piano was part of the trust property, and since Eleanor did not authorize its sale, the proceeds must be restored to the trust. My father's jaw tightened. How much? Harold looked at him for one long second. You already know how much. Nobody moved. $95,000? Harold said. Returned in full. Megan's eyes widened. But the money is gone. Harold glanced toward the front window. Then I suggest you start with the car. My car? Megan said. Like Harold had suggested removing one of her kidneys. It was purchased with proceeds from unauthorized sale of trust property. Harold said, "So yes?" "Miss Thompson." "Your car." Megan turned to Daniel. "Say something." Daniel looked uncomfortable enough to qualify for medical assistance. "I think," he said slowly, "this is a family legal matter." Translation: I am not getting pulled under this bus with you. Megan looked stunned. James Harrison cleared his throat. "Richard, I believe our pending business arrangement needs to be paused until this is resolved." My father's face shifted from anger to panic, so fast I almost missed it. "James, that is unnecessary." "I disagree." 3 words. Calm. Final. Expensive. My father's grip tightened around his glass. Harold placed the trust document on the table. "Eleanor has authorized a formal demand. The $95,000 must be returned." She initially instructed me to set a 30-day deadline. My mother whispered, "We do not have that kind of cash." Harold's expression did not change. "That is a problem created by your choices." For the first time all day, I saw my parents not as powerful, not as untouchable, not as the judges of my life. I saw them as people who had made a cruel decision and expected love. And silence to protect them from the bill. But the bill had arrived anyway. My father turned on me again. "You are enjoying this." I looked at the empty corner where the piano had been. "No," I said. "I am not." And that was true. I was not enjoying it. I was shaking. I was sad. I was angry. I was relieved. I was watching my family collapse in public. And no decent person enjoys that completely. But I was done confusing discomfort with wrongdoing. I did not sell the piano. I said, I did not lie about Grandma. I did not buy that car. I did not stand in this room and tell everyone theft was generosity. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "You are humiliating us." I looked at her, and my voice stayed steady. "No, you are finally hearing what you did without me covering it up." That was when I understood what Grandma had meant by accountability. It was not lightning. It was not revenge. It was not some dramatic punishment falling from the sky. It was the truth being placed on the table where everyone could see it. And for my family, that was more terrifying than any shouting could ever be. The truth sat there longer than anyone wanted it to. Nobody rushed to the cake. Nobody asked for coffee. Nobody complimented my mother's dress, or Megan's bracelet, or the shiny Mercedes parked outside like the world's most expensive bad decision. For once, my family had run out of performance. Harold began gathering the documents with calm, careful movements. "There will be formal paperwork," he said. "Lease terms, repayment terms, property access rules. Eleanor has authorized me to proceed immediately." My father stared at him. "You cannot expect us to sign anything today." "I expect nothing," Harold said. "I advise. The law handles the rest." That was another thing about Harold. He did not need to raise his voice. He could make a sentence sound like a locked door. My mother sank into a dining chair. The birthday banner over the window sagged slightly at one corner, and I had the ridiculous thought that even the decorations wanted to leave. Megan was crying now, but not softly. She was doing that sharp, breathy crying that demanded witnesses. "This is so unfair," she said. "I did not know where the money came from." I looked at her. "Megan, what? You texted me that the car was already registered. So it was done anyway." Her mouth opened, then closed. Daniel looked at her like he had just found a roach in an expensive salad. "I think I need some air," he said. Megan grabbed his arm. "Daniel? Wait." But he was already stepping away. His father followed him toward the front hall, stopping only long enough to give my father a stiff nod. "Richard," James Harrison said, "we will speak later." My father's face tightened. "James, please. This has been exaggerated." James looked toward the empty corner where the Steinway had been. "If you would do this to your own mother, I have to ask what you would do to a business partner." Then he left. The front door closed quietly. Not slammed. No dramate. Just closed. Somehow, that was worse. Guests began leaving after that. Coats were collected. Purses were lifted. People murmured things like, "Take care," and "We will call you," in voices that made it clear they absolutely would not. A neighbor hugged Aunt Margaret. One of my uncles avoided looking at my father altogether. Someone took a paper plate of appetizers, which felt bold. But honestly, those crab cakes had already seen enough. Within 20 minutes, the house was nearly empty. The untouched cake sat in the dining room. White frosting, gold lettering, 60 candles still in their package beside it. My mother looked at it like it had betrayed her too. Harold pulled me aside near the living room window. "Annabelle," he said quietly. "Eleanor gave you discretion on timing. Legally, you can demand that they vacate the property quickly, especially given the unauthorized sale." I looked across the room. My father stood by the fireplace, one hand braced on the mantel. My mother sat at the table with mascara under her eyes. Megan had gone outside, probably to sit in the Mercedes and mourn the only relationship in that driveway that had ever made her feel special. Part of me wanted to be hard. Not cruel. Exactly. Just hard. I wanted to say, "Get out." I wanted them to feel what it was like to have the floor disappear. I wanted my father to pack boxes in the same house where he had told me my life was small. I wanted my mother to explain to her friends why she no longer lived in the home she had decorated like a monument to herself. But Grandma's voice was still in my head. Mercy does not mean silence. And silence was over. "I do not want to throw them out today," I said. Harold studied me. "Are you certain?" "Yes." My voice shook a little. But the decision felt right. "I want the $95,000 returned. But give them 90 days. Not 30. They can sell the car, return it. Whatever they have to do. I do not care." Harold nodded slowly. "And the house? They can stay for now, under a real lease. Minimal rent. Written terms? No selling anything. No changes. No pretending they own it. That is reasonable. When Grandma passes..." I stopped because saying it out loud hurt more than I expected. Harold waited. "When she passes, they get 12 months to move out." His face softened. "That is generous." "Maybe." I looked at my parents again. "But I am not doing this to become them." For the first time all day, Harold smiled a little. "Eleanor predicted you would say something like that." Of course she did. The agreement was written at the dining table where my mother had planned to serve birthday cake. There was something almost poetic about it. Though Grandma would probably tell me not to get carried away, my parents signed because they had no better option. My father did not look at me once. My mother's hand shook so badly, Harold had to slide the paper closer so she could finish her signature. Megan came back inside halfway through. Her eyes were red. Her phone was in her hand. "Dania left?" she said. Nobody answered. For once, no one rushed to comfort her first. After the last signature was done, Harold packed the documents into his briefcase. "I will be in touch tomorrow," he said. Then he looked at me. "Your grandmother asked that you call her when you were ready." My chest tightened. I walked into the living room and stood in the empty corner where the Steinway used to be. I opened my phone and called the hospice number. Nurse Carol answered. Then helped Grandma connect on video. Her face appeared on the screen, pale and tired, but peaceful. "My brave girl," she said. That was all it took. My eyes filled. "I do not feel brave." "That is because you are honest. Brave people rarely feel brave while doing the thing." I laughed through the tears. "That sounds inconvenient." "It usually is." I told her what happened. Not every detail, but enough. Harold had probably already texted her the legal pieces. But I told her about Aunt Margaret standing up, about James Harrison leaving, about the lease, the repayment, the 12 months. Grandma listened quietly. "You gave them more grace than they gave you," she said. "I do not know if that was smart. It was yours to give. That is what matters." I pressed my fingers against the phone screen. "I wish you were here." "I was," she said softly. "Just not in the way they expected." She passed 3 weeks later. The hospice called me before sunrise. I got there in time. She was awake. Barely. But she knew me. I held her hand while the room slowly filled with morning light. "I am sorry I waited so long to protect you," she whispered. "You protected me when it mattered?" "No," she said. "You protected yourself. Remember that." Those were the last clear words she said to me. Grandma Eleanor died that evening with my hand in hers. The funeral was simple, because that was what she wanted. No ridiculous flower walls. No dramatic speeches from people who had not visited. No expensive display designed to impress strangers. Just music, memories, and the people who had actually loved her. I played Chopin at the service on the church's old upright piano, not the Steinway. That still hurt. I think it always will. But the music carried anyway, and that felt like something Grandma would have approved of. My parents sat in the back. Megan did not come. My mother told someone she was too emotionally fragile, which was a funny way to describe someone who had been strong enough to accept a stolen Mercedes. 6 months later, I moved into Grandma's house. At first, it felt strange. Every room had a memory. The kitchen where she corrected my posture while making tea. The hallway where she kept old concert photos. The front window where the Steinway had stood for decades. I used part of the returned money to buy a Yamaha grand piano. Not as old. Not as rare. Not Grandma's. But when it arrived and the movers placed it in that same corner, I stood there with my hand on the polished wood and cried like a fool in front of 3 men wearing work gloves. One of them handed me a tissue from his pocket and said, "My mom cried when she got her piano too." So at least I was in good company. My parents moved out 2 months after Grandma died. They did not wait the full 12 months. My father's business had shrunk after James Harrison pulled out of their deal. My mother joined a new social club across town. One where people did not already know the story. They bought a small condo and sent me one stiff email with their forwarding address. No apology. Not that I expected one. Megan called 8 months after the funeral. I almost did not answer, but I did. Her voice was different. Smaller. Less polished. "I am not calling to ask for anything," she said. "That is new?" She let out a weak laugh. "I deserved that." I waited. "I am in therapy," she said. "I started working at a marketing firm. Entry level. I take the bus." I could have said something sharp. I had several options ready. Honestly, a whole menu. But I only said, "That sounds like a start." She was quiet for a moment. "I thought being the favorite meant I was loved better," she said. "I think it just made me useless." That one got to me. Not enough to erase everything, but enough to remind me that spoiled children do not raise themselves. "I am glad you are figuring things out," I said, "but trust will take time." "I know." We hung up without a neat ending. Real life is rude that way. It does not always hand you a clean bow. Now, a year after Grandma entered hospice, I teach lessons from her house on weekends. Children sit at my piano and play wrong notes with complete confidence, which I respect more than I should. Aunt Margaret visits on Sundays. Nurse Carol sends Christmas cards. Sometimes I sit by the window in the evening and play until the house feels full again. I do not have the original Steinway. I do not have the family I used to keep trying to earn. But I have peace. I have boundaries. I have a life built on truth instead of silence. And if there is one thing I learned from all of this, it is this. Family love should not require you to disappear. If keeping the peace means protecting a lie, that is not peace. That is a cage with nicer curtains. Grandma left me a house. Yes, she left me money. Yes, but the real inheritance was the courage to stop begging people to value me after they had already shown me they would rather use me. These days, when I sit at the piano and place my hands on the keys, I still think of her. I think of her voice. Again, so I play. Not perfectly, but I keep going. The deepest lesson in this story is that silence is not always kindness. Sometimes, silence only protects the people who caused the harm. Annabelle spent years trying to keep peace in her family. But peace built on disrespect is not real peace. It is only pain with a polite face. For older viewers, this message matters because many people have spent a lifetime putting family first. Even when family did not treat them fairly. This story reminds us that love should never require someone to erase themselves. Being patient, generous, and forgiving is good. But those virtues should not become permission for others to take advantage of you. Grandma Eleanor's true inheritance was not just the house, the money, or the piano. Her real gift was teaching Annabelle to stand in the truth. She showed her that boundaries are not selfish. They are a way of protecting dignity, memory, and self-respect. In life, we may not always get an apology. We may not always get justice exactly when we want it. But we can still choose honesty over silence, self-respect over approval, and peace over pretending.